The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So is it cold enough for you? Ha, ha, ha. Don't we always say that in the summer? Hot enough for you? Cold enough for you? 13 degrees on my car dashboard this morning when I got in it. Hey, it is what it is, right? We could all move to Arizona if we wanted to, or maybe not. You know, some of us have spent most of our lives here. You can complain about the weather if you'd like, but it's okay. Sooner than you think, we'll have hot weather again. So deal with that. We're going to talk about the Adam Peters introductory news conference yesterday. Obviously, pulled some of the comments from both Josh Harris, the owner, and Adam Peters about what they said about rebuilding the football team, which is, I was just thinking about this, that the National Cathedral is constantly under construction. You know, what is the cathedral? Well over 100 years old, right? And they're always building it. And that's what seems to be going on here. It's constantly under construction, but not in a way of just touching up the edges if you're a team like the Baltimore Ravens or now the 49ers where Adam Peters comes from. It's under reconstruction all the time. And maybe this now is finally the combination that they need to become a respectable organization again. Seemingly good ownership with a good hire here at Adam Peters, and hopefully he's going to make a good hire with the coach, make a good selection if they keep it at number 2, and rebuild a football team that has just been a complete disaster for a quarter of a century. And I was thinking, all the news conferences that we've had over the years, in recent years, with coaching changes, whether it's, Marty Schottenheimer coming in 2001 and saying, frankly, all Dan wants to do is win. Yes, Dan wanted to win, and Dan was willing to butt out until he wasn't willing to butt out anymore. And then Marty said, forget it. It's my way or the highway. And Snyder said, take the highway. He left, and, that led us to the old ball coach, Steve Spurrier, who didn't really have any idea about coaching in the NFL. Yes, Joe Gibbs, too, arrived, and that was great, and everybody felt good. And unfortunately, Joe Gibbs 2 wasn't as good as Joe Gibbs 1. Most sequels aren't, but compared to everything else that happened during the Snyder regime, that was a good run of 4 years. They made the playoffs twice. Then came the buffoonery of Jim Zorn for a couple of years. All of these coaching changes, right? You're not hearing anything about front office changes. It's all about coaching. Try this, try that, try this. And then, okay, here comes Mike Shanahan with his 2 Super Bowl trophies. Finally, some sanity is going to be restored to the organization. He gets run out of town thanks to RG3 getting the owner to side with him and undermine the coach. That was a disaster. Then Club J arrives. And, Jay Gruden, compared to a lot of things that went on here, was okay. I mean, they made the playoffs once. He was seemingly a good guy. But ultimately, he was shown the door during the season. And then you got 4 years of the coach-centric operation, which has left this roster barren. I mean, this comment I thought was really telling yesterday from Adam Peters when he was introduced as the general manager of the team. He was asked about the roster, and he said, there's cornerstone pieces on this roster. I believe we have work to do, meaning there ain't much here. Outside of Terry McLaurin and Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne and, maybe a lineman here or there like Sam Cosmi, there ain't much. There ain't much to work with here. So this is going to be a complete rebuild of the roster, which he says is going to be done through the draft. And I also like this comment. He said about free agency, it's going to be process-driven and diligent. Well, it had been anything but going back to 2000 when Dan Snyder went for it and signed anybody who had a name, Deion Sanders, past his prime time, obviously. You had Jeff George, who was so cancerous in Minnesota, even though they made it to the second round of the playoffs, they couldn't wait to get rid of him, and they brought him in, along with Bruce Smith, who gave him a couple of decent years, but he too was over the hill, and by the end was just chasing the sack record. So, we've finally got sanity here. And, if you look at all the changes that have happened here, there hasn't been anything like this in the front office. When Dan Snyder took over as owner, he demoted Charlie Casserly. He wanted Vinny Serrato to run things, and Casserly said, forget that. I'm out of here. He left a week before training camp. A week before the first training camp under the ownership of Dan Snyder, the general manager leaves the team. And it's put in charge with Vinny Serrato, who was Snyder's, stooge, willing to do whatever he wanted, including chase these big names like Dion and Bruce Smith. And then Marty comes in, and Marty tells Vinny, hit the road, son. We don't want you around here. Marty gets fired. Vinny comes back. It's more Vinny, more foolishness. I think one of the things that was a real telltale sign with Joe Gibbs, too, was he was willing to keep Vinny Serrato around. That was a very bad sign right from the beginning. Then Gibbs leaves, and we get 2 years of Zorn nonsense, and then Vinny gets booted before the end of Zorn, and here comes Bruce Allen. I don't really remember an introductory news conference for Bruce Allen. I'm not sure they had one. I think he just arrived and was the team president, and we thought, oh, okay, now we got an adult in charge, and they're bringing in Mike Shanahan, and things are going to be okay. Well, Shanahan gets fired. Bruce Allen stays. It gets worse, and it gets worse, and finally he has that ridiculous news conference at the end of another horrible season where he says they're winning off the field, which, is going to be also part of his legacy, along with the culture is damn good. And they bring in Scott McCloughan, who was successful. McCloughan worked in San Francisco, and he worked in Seattle, and he helped to build Super Bowl teams. He was good. But Bruce Allen didn't like the fact that he was getting so much credit for a team that made the playoffs in 2015. So they ran McCloughan out of here, claiming he was a drunk. And Bruce Allen ran it, and then, this coach-centric operation under Ron Rivera, well, you see what you got, where the new guy walks in and goes, there's some cornerstone pieces here, but we got work to do. we got real work to do. All right, let's go through some of the highlights from yesterday. It was about a 20-minute news conference with Josh Harris. Josh Harris sitting there, and he's again, I've been very impressed with him in these news conferences. He's not the smoothest of speakers, but there's a real honesty to him when he talks, and there's real believability about him. So this was his, I guess, formal introduction of the new general manager of the team as he introduces his man, Adam Peters, who he said was his number one priority.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level and build an elite team that consistently competes for championships. In Adam, I think we have the right leader. He's a winner. He's made an incredible impact everywhere he's been, starting obviously with the New England Patriots, on to the Denver Broncos, where they won a Super Bowl, and then at the San Francisco 49ers. Together, we are committed to restoring this franchise to the highest levels. Adam, again, we're excited you're here, and now time to get to work.
Now, looks aren't everything. We know that in life, in all phases of life. But if anybody ever looked the part, Peters looks the part. Adam Peters is really former college football player at UCLA. He looks like he's about 6'3", 6'4". Showed up with his beautiful wife and two beautiful daughters, and just looks like a guy who exudes confidence. He really just gives off that scent. And you see people in boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies looking like Peters all the time. This is what Harris said, though, made him stand out above the other candidates.
Adam's a winner. He's won everywhere he's been. First in Boston, then in, obviously, Denver, then in San Francisco. And he's learned from a lot of great leaders. He's about excellence. He's about attracting the best people and then holding them accountable. He's about building edges. He's inclusive. He wants people from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different perspectives, and So it was a pretty easy decision from my point of view. In terms of how we do it, both of us work super hard. Both of us want to do things from the ground up, one person at a time, but both of us want to take more of a long-term perspective to build sustainable and elite winning. And so I think, he was an ideal candidate from my point of view.
Yeah, I think he might have even stayed in San Francisco without this offer. That's kind of the vibe that I got from the news conference yesterday. This is the number one priority right now. Now that Peters is on the job, you got to hire a coach. And the question to both Peters and Harris yesterday, what are you looking for in a head coach?
It's not going to be in a box. It's not going to be offense. It's not going to be defense. It's going to be the best leader for this organization.
Adam, Chick Hernandez, WSA 9. Along those lines, what's for you, for a head coach, both of you, what's the most important factor in hiring a head coach?
I think in any head coach and any leader, it's just leadership. Leadership, great communication, being able to be honest, direct, and upfront, have all those qualities, and they're all intertwined. But those are the main qualities. You have to be very smart. You have to be very driven. There's so many different qualities that make up a great head coach and a great leader. But really, it's just about being a great person, a great human being that people will follow.
Both of us are, in essence, come from the model that we're stewards for the city, and that we're on a mission to deliver success to Washington. And so obviously, hiring a coach that is on the mission with us, that is all in, that himself or herself can attract the best people, all of those things, and then hold them accountable, and obviously ultimately comes with a certain amount of IQ, football intelligence. I think IQ matters. I think it matters increasingly. So I think that all of those things will be important, but ultimately a partner, where the three of us can be aligned and, work for the city, on behalf of the city to win.
Now, finding that coach, as you heard Peters say, not necessarily offense, not necessarily defense. The list is pretty well known. I mean, I don't think there's real dispute among the beat people who are covering the team as to who they're talking to. The number one target, though, does appear to be Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. They're going to talk to him on Friday. And the way it works, since his team is still involved in the playoffs, since they have a game coming up this week, it's got to be a Zoom call, and they really won't be able to meet with him in person until they're eliminated. And I think, I'm not sure when the actual hiring can begin of coaches who are still employed by other teams, but we're not quite there yet. And if you'll notice, I mean, the only thing that's happened so far is Gerard Mayo moved up when Bill Belichick went out, but that was already in place. They had a succession plan. All these other openings, it seems to be a mad scramble. Now here are the other names that are being suggested as possibilities for Washington. One of them, Bobby Slowick. He was here. It seems like everybody was here over the years, and it seemed like at some point they all worked for Mike Shanahan. But Slowick was actually here and started as a defensive assistant, worked in the film room, and has moved on to various roles. But what he did last week, his offense against what Cleveland's defense was, and that was supposed to be one, and was during the season, one of the best defenses in the league. I mean, take away the 2 pick sixes that were thrown by Flacco, it was still a rout by Houston in that game. He's the offensive coordinator of the Texans. They're still involved, but he does have a connection to Peters in that he served various roles on the 49ers coaching staff, including the passing game from 2017 to 2012. Another connection to Peters is Matt LaFleur, the offensive coordinator. Mike LaFleur. Matt LaFleur is the coach of the Packers. Mike LaFleur, offensive coordinator, Rams, was a passing game coordinator for the 49ers from 2017 to 2020. It doesn't always work, as we saw with Ron Rivera, bringing in guys you worked with in the past, familiar names, people that you know. It doesn't always work that way, but people tend to be more interested in people that they know. Another name, Steve Wilkes, who's the defensive coordinator of the 49ers. He did, I thought, a hell of a job last year, not this past season, but the season before in Carolina. Got 1 year with the Arizona Cardinals before they ran him out. He might be a possibility, though he's a defensive guy. Now, you know, what you're hearing from Peters is they're not necessarily going for an offensive or defensive guy, so they're open to a lot of possibilities. They have also interviewed Anthony Weaver, who's the Baltimore defensive line coach, and Mike McDonald, who is the defensive coordinator for the Ravens. There is interest in Aaron Glenn, who's the defensive coordinator for Detroit, Raheem Morris, defensive coordinator for the Rams, and Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. So a lot of defensive names in there, and really, it sounds to me, just looking at this, you know, from far away, this looks to me like they're zeroed in on getting Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is their guy. He's their offensive guy. If they don't get him, they're probably going to move on to some other offensive guys that they focus on. In the meantime, if they are going to go defense, they've got all these names that they've either talked to or are due to talk to. You know, look at the names: Quinn, defense; Morris, defense; Glenn, defense; McDonald, defense; Weaver, defense. Mike LaFleur, okay, he's offense, so that's an offensive name. Bobby Slowick, offensive name. And, of course, Ben Johnson. So, I would expect, wouldn't be surprised if we get a coach as soon as it's possible, as soon as there's the green light from the NFL, depending on their situation. I want to read you, though, one last thing on this from a column that Barry Zerluga wrote today. Barry was at the news conference yesterday, and he talked about this search for a coach where Harris is going to work in conjunction with the committee that he has put together, of various people who have helped him in this process. And he writes, in helping Harris pick that coach from among a group that includes offensive coordinators Ben Johnson of Detroit and Bobby Slowick of Houston, as well as defensive coordinators Mike McDonald of Baltimore and Raheem Morris of the Rams, Peters is operating in a decidedly different environment than has been in the building for decades. He is aligned with ownership. He wants to hire a person who will help him elevate both the current roster and the best fit for the second pick in the draft. The team has draft capital, salary cap space, and thorough process-oriented people in charge of how to use both. When exactly has Washington had the most optimistic look in the division? Now this is all relative because if it's not as if Peters flipped the roster this week and the Commanders suddenly have more talent than the Eagles or Cowboys. They don't. But we saw what happened to the Cowboys and the Eagles over the weekend. They're crashing and burning. And while this situation here, yeah, I mean, the cupboard is bare, but you got cap room, you got a draft pick, and for the first time, you've got sanity in the organization where Barry can write lines like this about Peters. He is aligned with ownership. He wants to hire a person who will help him evaluate both the current roster and the best fit for the second pick of the draft. The team has draft capital, salary cap space, and thorough process-oriented people in charge of how to use both. Hallelujah. How long have we waited for that? Wow. All right, coming up, the question that was asked yesterday at the news conference for Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach Todd Bowles as he gets ready to go to Detroit. Wait till you hear this. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I got Tony at 11 o'clock, and 1 hour from now, we'll look back at the 1998 NFC Championship game, which took place in 1999 and was therefore 25 years ago today, and is worth looking back on a team that truly blew it in an unbelievable way. I think history might be a lot different in the Super Bowls. John Elway might not necessarily have exited with his second straight championship had Gary Anderson done what he did all year, kick a field goal. And this was a very makeable field goal indoors. He missed it, and the rest is history. We'll get to all that. I forgot to mention in the update, probably should throw this in, that Sean Doolittle is going to be a pitching strategist for the Nationals. And look, he's a local hero. He's he's a great part of the fabric of that 2019 World Series championship team. There's always going to be a warm spot in everybody's heart for Sean Doolittle. He's a very intelligent guy. He lives in the District of Columbia, loves the district. Hell, he may run for mayor someday. Who knows? But I just have to laugh when I see these titles. Pitching strategist. When I was a kid, a long time ago, the Washington Senators, I think, had 3 coaches with whoever was the manager. Was it Gil Hodges or Ted Williams or whoever was Bob Lemon? I think or Jim Lemon was the manager. They had 11 years here. They probably had 4 or 5 managers during the time. As I remember, there were only 3 coaches. There was a first base coach, there was a third base coach, and there was a pitching coach and the manager. And that seemed to be enough. But now you hear about these various titles on staffs and how deep they go. And, yeah, video study is a bigger part of things now. I understand all that. But it's just remarkable, the jobs that they have for these. And the money has had a lot to do with it, the fact that there's so much more money available in the sport. But a pitching strategist, interesting cocktail party talk. I would say if I'm a strategist, my strategy would be to throw strikes. But, again, I've never played even at the high school level, so I can't tell you that. But pitching strategist. I'm surprised that he's not pursuing broadcasting because he's really smart and funny. But he, I guess, still has an itch to be a part of the game, put on a uniform every day. So Sean Doolittle is going to be a part of the staff with the Nationals as a pitching strategist. Speaking of strategy, this is yesterday. Regular news conference as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers get ready to go to Detroit on Sunday to play the Lions in the divisional playoffs. And with any team, there's a group of beat writers that's there for virtually every news conference. They cover the games. They're all a part of the flow of information from the team to the fan base. And there's some excellent ones here. Nikki Givallo covers the Commanders for the Post, and Ben Standing, who does it for The Athletic. David Aldridge does a lot of coverage in that. We've got, and I think he's been a great addition to the Washington Times. Michael Phillips, who covered the team for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, he's a part of it. They're all people there every day. They know all the ins and outs of the team and are really good at what they do. What happens when you get to this level of the season, where a team is now one of 4 teams left in the NFC, is stations, TV stations in particular, start to send news reporters out to cover these news conferences. And if you don't know exactly what's going on, you probably should just be quiet and listen to the other questions and then try and put your story together the best you can. Well, I don't know where this particular reporter was from, which station, but she asked a question at the news conference yesterday of Todd Bowles, which not every coach would have had this kind of restraint. Listen to what happened yesterday at the Todd Bowles news conference in Tampa Bay as they prepare to play the Lions in Detroit on Sunday.
Coach, looking forward towards Detroit. The weather has been a factor in some of the playoff games, even for the most prepared teams. Today, it's 13 in Detroit, which doesn't compare to some of the temperatures we tend to drop to. Any special plans to acclimate the team to not only endure, but perform in those kind of frigid temperatures should you face them in Detroit?
You do know we play indoors, right? And they got a dome. No, nothing planned. We're indoors, and we only have to be outside for 20 seconds getting off the bus going under the thing, so we'll be okay.
Not every coach would have been that nice. We play indoors. She said it's going to be 13 degrees in Detroit. Are you preparing your team for that? Obviously, she watched some of the playoffs, saw how cold it was in Kansas City, where Patrick Mahomes' helmet cracked from the cold. I'll get to that story in just a bit. But she's wondering about the cold in Detroit. It's not like they moved into the dome in Detroit yesterday. They have been playing indoors in Detroit for over 50 years. The Pontiac Silverdome might have been the second indoor facility, maybe the third next to the Superdome in New Orleans. Houston Astrodome was first. But within 10 years of the Astrodome being built, we had the Silverdome in Detroit, which gave way to Ford Field, which is an indoor facility downtown. And, you know, I don't know whether she went to this news conference thinking, oh, this is going to be a really good question to ask about how his team prepares for the cold since we're in Tampa here and it's, you know, nice and warm and they're going to have to play in Detroit. And he said, well, we play indoors and, yeah, it's only going to be about 20 seconds from when we get off the bus into the stadium. I was actually a part of a news conference once in Dallas. This is going back over 40 years ago when Tom Landry was asked a similar question about playing the Minnesota Vikings, who at that point had moved into the Metrodome. They had only been there like a year or two, but they were playing indoors in the Metrodome, and somebody asked him about that. And he was, you know, nice enough to point out that it was an indoor facility. But as a matter of fact, the roof collapsed before the game. It did that a few times over the years. So there was the possibility that weather was going to play a factor in the game. But, you know, this is part of the problem is that you bring in people from the outside who are not used to covering the beat, and they think they're going to ask a clever question, and you wind up embarrassing the hell out of yourself. I don't know who this woman is. I don't know, you know, whether she was asked about the question and how she formulated it later or whatever. But good for Todd Bowles for not being a jerk about it. I remember this when I was covering the Giants, and we had daily news conferences with Bill Parcells during training camp. And usually it was the same group of people, a group of writers, and I was covering it for WFAN. Occasionally there'd be some television people there. But one time there were a couple of guys who stood in the back, and Parcells opened it up to the usual questions about injuries and depth chart and things like that. And these guys started asking some questions from the back, like, you know, what's your greatest thrill as a coach? You know, how great was it to win that Super Bowl? And, you know, just kind of questions that you would ask in a sit-down interview if you were doing a long, you know, piece on their career. But the general use of these news conferences is just get the updates on various things. So finally, after a few of these questions, Parcells says, where are you guys from? And he says, we're from Scranton. And Parcells says, Scranton? You see, I knew that they had helmets there, but I thought they all had headlights on them. And, you know, everybody got a good laugh about that. And he was nice about it, and it wasn't like this. But somebody would ask Bill Parcells, you know, he could bite your head off anything. So if he wasn't in the right mood and somebody asked him about playing in weather in Detroit when they had an indoor stadium, he might have gone, you know, full-fledged beat red embarrassment for whoever asked it. But good for Todd Bowles for being nice about it. I mean, again, it also paints people who do this for a living in a bad way. Like they get lumped in with this woman and the dumb question. Like, oh, these stupid reporters. No, most of them ask great questions, and most of them are well researched in what they ask. And this woman decided that she was going to ask about the weather in Detroit when they have been playing indoors for 50 freaking years. Great restraint by Todd Bowles. Got to say that. All right, we're rolling till 11 o'clock today. Tony's got a show coming up at 11. 10:45, the NFC Championship game. And what a heartbreaker it was for the Minnesota Vikings 25 years ago today. We spent a lot of time last hour talking about the Adam Peters hire and what it means for the franchise. What a breath of fresh air it is. And Barry Zerluga's got a column in the Post today about how things are starting to look a little bit different now in the NFC East. We had the meltdown of the Cowboys at home over the weekend, and Monday, what happened to the Philadelphia Eagles in Tampa, and their coaching situation, very uncertain. Both teams, Nick Sirianni, making the Super Bowl last year, having this team heading in an upward direction. They've got their quarterback and Jalen Hurts, and everything looks rosy there. And now there's great uncertainty with the monumental collapse that they had at the end of the season. And then the Dallas Cowboys have had great regular seasons under Mike McCarthy and maybe have one of those guys in Dak Prescott who's due a lot of money in a contract extension. And they had one of the most embarrassing playoff losses you'll ever see. We had, in this area, had seemingly cornered the market on embarrassment. We had so much over the years, from Jim Zorn and the swinging gate to what Robert Griffin put the whole organization through what Dan Snyder enabled him to do, not to mention the criminal acts that Snyder was accused of and ultimately paid a $60 million fine for before they got him out of town. I mean, this was our business. You know, they're stealing our act in Dallas and Philadelphia. And not that the Giants, you know, are a stable organization at this point. You got to figure Brian Daboll's on the hot seat going in. But here, we had a very rosy day yesterday as Adam Peters was introduced. And he said all the right things. Josh Harris, and hiring him, said all the right things about what they want to do as an organization. And then picking a head coach, he wasn't tipping his hand whether it was going to be offense or defense, but there's a bunch of names that are being mentioned, all of them with great credentials, and many of them are coaches that would not have considered going here under the Dan Snyder ownership. And as Barry writes, Peters is operating in a decidedly different environment than has been in the building for decades. He is aligned with ownership. He wants to hire a person who will help him evaluate both the current roster and the best fit for the second pick in the draft. The team has draft capital, salary cap space, and thorough process-oriented people in charge of how to use both. When exactly has Washington had the most optimistic look in the division? Now it's all relative, because it's not as if Peters flipped the roster this week and the Commanders suddenly have more talent than the Eagles or Cowboys. They don't. And in fact, Peters, asked about it yesterday, said that the roster has, quote, cornerstone pieces. I believe we have work to do. Yes, they do. The cupboard is bare. But when they look for free agents, and he said it's going to be a team that's going to be built on the draft, it's going to be process-driven and diligent in who we select in free agency. You know, some of us are old enough to remember the Deion Sanders, Bruce Smith money chase, you know, that they did years ago, not to mention the Jeff George flaming disaster, the money chase for the biggest name coaches. And, you know, not that they were bad hires. Marty Schottenheimer was a good hire. It just was handled horribly here. Same thing with Mike Shanahan. They wanted John Gruden. They got Jay Gruden. Okay, that didn't work out so well. They got a coach in Ron Rivera who was a name, and it's turned out was a mediocre coach and a terrible evaluator of talent, which is leading, you know, the new GM to say the cornerstone pieces of this roster, and we got work to do, that kind of thing. But, you know, what you feel now is just so different than has been in the past. And in terms of what they're doing in the coaching search, it does appear that Ben Johnson is their number one target. He's the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. They can talk to him by Zoom on Friday. They're due to do that. Other offensive names that are being offered, and some of them have connections to this organization as well as connections to Peters. And this is, I think, part of the downfall, too, of Rivera. He brought in his whole group from Carolina, and the Carolina Mafia, you know, didn't perform here. But there are ties to Peters, and Bobby Slowick, who I thought did a hell of a job last weekend against what was a great defense during the regular season for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, they hung 45 on them, you know, partially because of the 2 pick sixes from Flacco, but they were really hitting on all cylinders with a rookie quarterback, C.J. Stroud. I mean, they looked really good, and they're going to put a scare in Baltimore this weekend. The Ravens are favored by 9.5, but I wouldn't rule out Houston giving them a game. Anyway, his connection to Peters is that he was on the 49ers staff from 2017 to 2022 before getting this promotion with Houston, so they know each other. Mike LaFleur, I keep saying Matt, but that's his brother. It's Matt LaFleur, who is, of course, a head coach himself with the Green Bay Packers. Mike LaFleur is the offensive coordinator with the Rams. I like that because of the connection with Sean McVay. I think that is going to be something that's going to be helpful for him. That's a possibility. He was the passing game coordinator for the 49ers from 2017 to 2020. And then the other connection would be defense. Steve Wilkes, who's the coordinator with the San Francisco 49ers, but has been the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. They gave him only 1 year before they got rid of him. And then did a great job as the interim coach for the Carolina Panthers, who absolutely stink right now. He went 6-6 after taking over in 2022 and has done a very good job as the defensive coordinator with the 49ers. They're also expected to talk to Dan Quinn, who's the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, Raheem Morris with the Rams, Aaron Glenn of Detroit, all defensive guys. They're on the list. They have reportedly talked to Anthony Weaver, who's the Ravens defensive line coach, and Mike McDonald, who is the defensive coordinator for the Ravens. And this is what you do when you're in a coaching search. You're seeing names of playoff teams, guys with playoff teams. Sometimes you'll get a guy hired off a bad team, but it doesn't happen very often. But all these guys who are on the radar are people who have been successful with other organizations. Look, when Norv Turner came here in 1994, there was euphoria. He had been the offensive coordinator of back-to-back Super Bowl champions with the Dallas Cowboys. And when he came in, it was like, okay, fresh start. Guy who knows what he's doing. He's coming off of Jimmy Johnson's staff. And in fact, Norv did finally get him to the playoffs, but it proved to not be a good head coach. So for all these names and for all the excitement about them, doesn't mean that they automatically become Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan. Doesn't happen that way. But I do like the structure. I do like the feel. I do like the combination of Josh Harris and Adam Peters. It feels right. And, they weren't necessarily going to get Peters unless it was this situation. He might have stayed in San Francisco. He's from that area. He might wait for a promotion. And there was even some talk that he might be moved up to general manager, that was going to happen. But he decided to take this. And it was, as he told reporters yesterday, a big part of it was this is a completely blank slate. There's no coach, there's salary cap room, and you got the number 2 pick of the draft, and you got brand new ownership.
It was everything to me. This opportunity with this ownership group in this place, I can't tell you how much that meant to me and our family. And that's why when this came about and I got to meet with everybody, right away I was all in. I probably wasn't a very good negotiator, but I told them I was all in. And that made it easy for me to pass up other opportunities, which were great opportunities as well. But this was the best opportunity in my mind in the NFL.
Unfortunately, he was a good negotiator, so thank his agent for that. But look, I think that Adam had done a lot of work. It's worth pointing out he had done a lot of work on us. Came in super prepared, had researched the team, had researched all of us, had researched the opportunity, had a lot of questions, but at the same time, it felt like it was an opportunity that he had identified before we had met, and then obviously we all ended up moving forward together.
Yeah, so it looks good. It feels good, looks good. And he looks good. He's a good-looking guy, this Peters. This is about the San Francisco experience that he had and what it might mean coming here. They were not a good team when they took over there 7 years ago when Kyle Shanahan moved in. And they've been to a Super Bowl. They got to an NFC Championship game this past year, and without the Brock Purdy elbow injury, they might have been in another Super Bowl. They're the favorites to get back to a Super Bowl this year as the top seed in the NFC. But as he told the reporters yesterday, it started off rocky, and it got right, and he feels like that can happen here.
Those were dark days, but I think the thing that I could tell you is right away with the 49ers, maybe the results didn't show, but you could see it on the field, and you could see what we were doing on the field, and the fans could feel it, and they knew it was turning, and we were close. So it's really, you can't put timetables on it, but what I can tell you is that you're going to see a great competitors. You're going to see a physical team. You're going to be really impressed with what you see on the field, and it's going to happen right away. Whether the results come right away, that's a number of different factors. But you guys are going to be very proud of the team that we're going to put on the field.
Well, I don't know how you can differentiate when you're losing as to what's good. I mean, we had some false hopes here, right? The two games against Philadelphia this year, that's when you had people say, well, maybe they're not so bad. Maybe Sam Howell is going to be a good quarterback. Look how well he played against the Eagles. Well, look at what the Eagles did in their last game, lifeless, and everybody else pounded the hell out of the Commanders. So maybe the Eagles weren't that good. I don't know necessarily how you're going to see this team being good when it's losing games, but maybe there'll be some signs on that. And as they acquire players through drafts, it's not going to be an immediate draft situation. I guess Houston is the closest to that, where you get C.J. Stroud and you turn one of the worst teams in the league into a playoff team that could be dangerous on the road this week in Baltimore. I don't know, but he's been there, done that with an organization that built from the ground up, and they've done good things. And selecting the right coach is going to be a big part of it. Also, this was from yesterday. Chick Hernandez of Channel 9 with a little bit of a sit down with Adam Peters and questions about. Well, he tried anyway to see what they're going to do with the number 2 pick of the draft.
With ownership groups, a lot of times the owner comes from outside the area. These guys are from here. They grew up here. They watched the old franchise and what they did, the 3 trophies in this building. So you know what they've been through. Is that a little bit of a different perspective, knowing what they brought to the table from just the human standpoint of this whole thing? Absolutely. They care. They're invested. Those types of things really make you really understand, and that back up the feeling that they want to do everything they can to make this thing great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What makes a great evaluator? I think you surround yourself with great people, and you use all the information you can to make the best decision for the ball club, not just for you, but for whoever it is you're going with, whether it's for the Washington Commanders or whatever. So it's not just me, trust me. No decision was made just by me, and no decision will be made just by me. Ultimately, it's going to be my decision, a lot of these, but I'm going to use all the really smart people here, most of them smarter than me, to help make those decisions. Sure. Part of that big job is you got a lot of picks. I mean, you have, there's a nice little thing in that kit and caboodle there, with the number 2 pick for now. All the things that you can do. You've been through this process before, where the phones are ringing and people are saying, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. How do you deal with that? What goes into that decision-making process? Yeah, luckily I have been through that, which, with John Lynch and Kyle, they've let me do and empowered me to do a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'll do here, is empower a lot of different people to do that too as well. And so we'll have a team of people working together on that, and you work to make the best decision for the organization, whether that's trade up, trade down, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But you will be ready for really any possible situation that comes up before it comes up. So we'll have gone through those exercises, so when the time comes, we'll be ready to strike. Are you telling me you don't know who you're going to pick with number 2 right now? I'm not telling you. Not even a hint?
Hey, he tried, right? I would think that they're going to take a quarterback, and Rick Spielman, in case you missed this, Spielman, part of the group that had advised Josh Harris on making this hire. Spielman did an interview a week or 2 ago where he said that Caleb Williams is a guy you have to go after. He didn't use those words, but he was asked about quarterbacks drafted number 1, and he said, of all the ones that have been taken, Manning, Elway, you name it, you take this guy over them. I mean, he's enamored with him. He's a generational quarterback. Now, whether they're going to do what it takes to move up to get it from the Bears, who knows? Whether they, go for Drake May, who probably would be available at number 2, and think he's their guy, we don't know. Or, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if they don't love either of those guys, and it's not everybody is in love with the guys who've been touted as the number 1 pick for a long, long time, like Caleb Williams. They may say, we can get a haul of draft picks, and there is a rebuild that has to take place here. When he used that term yesterday, Peters did, about a couple of cornerstone pieces, that means there ain't anything here. And so if they can get a lot of picks and rebuild with that, doesn't always work out, I mean, all the picks that Washington gave to St. Louis to move up to get Robert Griffin III, that didn't work out that well for them either. But I would think that, again, he's going to make a decision based on his instincts and talking to a lot of smart people, which is, I think, the best way to make decisions. I came across this story, and it's we kind of had that here. Do you remember the name Sammis Reyes? Sammis Reyes played on the then Washington football team in the 2021 season. Now, I thought this was ridiculous when they brought him in. He became the first player from Chile to play in the NFL. He had been a college basketball player and not a very good one. He was at the end of the bench for Tulane for a couple of years and decided that he was going to try and play football. He had never played in any football game whatsoever, not even in high school. High school, his focus was on basketball. He did not play football even in high school, of course not in college, and he trained, went to the combine, and Washington signed him as a tight end. And I thought, oh, man, this is ridiculous. That, you get hit in the NFL, it's a lot different than anything else you could possibly experience. I've talked to many pro football players, and they said it's like a car wreck. Every time you get hurt, this isn't going to work. I mean, he was a big guy, 6'5", 260 pounds. He looked like a football player. Well, God bless him. He made the team, played special teams, didn't have any catches as a tight end, but did actually play in 11 games that year. Then he was signed by the Bears to their practice squad, didn't appear in any games, was with Jacksonville this past season, and then announced his retirement just before the start of the year. And he's 28 years old, and it's over. So I mean, that's a dream that I guess you'd say was fulfilled. What were the possibilities when he finished playing college basketball that he was going to make it in the NFL? He did. He had a cup of coffee. He played more than some. Not as much as many, but, he made it. He made it in the league. So now we have this story. A Welsh rugby player, Luis Rhys-Zammit, leaving his current sport to pursue the NFL. He's a winger for the British and Irish Lions. He's only 22 years old, so he's a top player in the Welsh Rugby League. He once hit a top speed of 24.2 miles an hour during a rugby game. And here's the comp. Tyreek Hill, who's considered to be the fastest player in the NFL, hit 23.2 on a 27-yard kickoff in 2016. So maybe he's lost a step since then. So Rhys-Zammit is faster than Tyreek Hill, it appears. Tyreek Hill, they call him the cheetah. And he is going to enter a program where they discover foreign talent, accepted an invitation to the NFL's International Player Pathway. The 10-week program will help him prepare to earn a spot on the roster. I guess Sammis Reyes did this as well. Here's the thing. At least Reyes was based on size and strength. So worst case scenario, he's a special teams guy. If you need an extra tight end in a blocking situation, maybe you put him in. If you're signing a guy based on speed, there's one thing that you have to really consider. Can he catch the ball? The road is paved with fast guys who couldn't catch. There have been Olympic sprinters over the years that have tried to play professional football and are fast enough to do it and just couldn't catch. I give Ronaldo Nehemiah all the credit in the world. Ronaldo Nehemiah, the greatest track athlete in the history of the University of Maryland, probably would have won a gold medal at the 1980 Olympics in the hurdles had we not boycotted. And in those days couldn't make money in professional track, decided that he would try the NFL. And he was signed by the San Francisco 49ers and played 3 years for them, won a Super Bowl with them. I mean, he had never played college football. He played in high school, didn't play in college. So it can happen. But this is going to be one to keep an eye on. If he can catch the ball, and if he's got that kind of speed, and if he's been playing rugby, which is a lot different than sprinting because you're getting hit in that, and that's, as they say, it takes leather balls to play rugby. Maybe. I don't know if he can necessarily become a great player, even a good player. But the NFL is turning over every stone to find talent, and when you have athletic ability like that you can run to a top speed of 24.2 miles an hour, it's worth kicking the tires, right? Okay, we'll get to what I've been talking about throughout the morning, and I think it's a really cool story. It was 25 years ago today that the Minnesota Vikings played in the NFC Championship game as an 11-point favorite with a kicker who literally had not missed. The kicker missed, and the rest is history. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock. So the 1983 Redskins set the record for most points scored in a season, 541. They lost 2 games, both on Monday night, both by 1 point. One to the Dallas Cowboys at home, and the other to the Green Bay Packers on the road when Mark Mosley missed a makeable field goal for him. But those were the 2 losses that they had. They clobbered the Rams in the opening of the playoffs, 51-7. They beat the San Francisco 49ers with a Mosley field goal after blowing a 21-0 lead, but they won that 24-21. And they went into the Super Bowl 18 against the Oakland Raiders as favorites, and they got their doors blown off, 38-9. And that team was regarded as maybe the greatest team to ever win a Super Bowl, that they had this record-setting point-scoring season. They were plus 43 on turnovers and had made it back to the Super Bowl as being Super Bowl defending champions, and they lost. Well, we go 15 years ahead to the Minnesota Vikings in the 1998 season. And they wound up surpassing the Redskins in points scored that year, where they had 556. Brian Billick was the offensive coordinator, and that was what propelled him to be coach of the Baltimore Ravens, the head coach, the following year. They finished the year at 15-1 and were considered just about prohibitive favorites to go to the Super Bowl. They played the Atlanta Falcons, the surprising Dirty Bird Atlanta Falcons, coached by Dan Reeves, who had really a good year and an unexpected year. And expected that they were going to go out in this NFC Championship game, get a pat on the back. Hey, nice job, good job. But the Minnesota Vikings are a far superior team. And the Vikings, again, 11-point favorites going into this game. Well, it gets down to the last minute of regulation, and it looks like the Vikings are going to put this game away. They're going to make it a 10-point lead with, again, about a minute or so left to go. And they bring in Gary Anderson, who at that point was the most accurate field goal kicker in the history of the game because he hadn't missed all year. He had not missed a field goal. He had not missed an extra point. And this was going to put the finishing touches on the NFC Championship game and send the Minnesota Vikings to the Super Bowl to play the defending champion Denver Broncos, who also had an unbelievable regular season. They were 13-0 before they lost a couple of games, but they finished 14-2 and were expected to put on a show with the Vikings, that this was going to be great. 2 of the great offenses ever, John Elway in what would be his last game, and then the Minnesota Vikings, who, believe it or not, were quarterbacked by Randall Cunningham. Cunningham had been the quarterback, and he really had them rolling, scoring points, which they did, but not quite enough. And they, as we hear here, had something unthinkable happen to them as they look to salt this game away. This is Jeff Hullinger and Jeff Van Note on Atlanta radio as they are calling what they think is going to be the final nail in the coffin on the season for the Atlanta Falcons.
Gary Anderson has hit 2 field goals already today, one from 29, one from 36. During the regular season, the South African native was 35 of 35, and he's made 122 consecutive kicks. His last miss versus Denver, December 15th of 1997. This is from 39 yards out. Here's the snap. The kick is up, and it is no good. No good. Gary Anderson has missed a field goal for the first time in 2 years.
Ronnie Bradford, tremendous pressure off the edge, it looked like, and also Ray Buchanan. Unbelievable. The season isn't over yet.
So it's not over yet. 2 minutes and 7 seconds are left in this ball game. Falcons trail 27-20. They take over the football at the 29-yard line, and they're not done yet, Jeff.
If I'm the Vikings, I'm saying, Gary Anderson, he doesn't miss.
Yeah, they should have said because the Falcons, with 2 minutes and 7 seconds left, I thought there was less time than that, but 2 minutes and 7 seconds left, the Falcons took the ball down the field, and they tied the game at 27. So it's 27-27 in overtime. And in those days, the team that scored first won. Even if you received the kickoff and kicked the field goal, you won. Even with the heartbreak of seeing what should have been a game-ending field goal come back to haunt them as they gave up a tying touchdown at the end, the Vikings still won the toss, but they couldn't pick up a first down. They punt to the Falcons, and then it comes down to this, and this is actually a little bit confusing because Gary Anderson does the unthinkable for the Vikings, missing a 39-yard field goal as to would have sent the Vikings to the Super Bowl. And now it comes down to Morton Anderson, no relation, but Morton Anderson for the Atlanta Falcons to overcome this seemingly ending field goal that Gary Anderson was supposed to hit. And he's the one that sends the Falcons to the Super Bowl.
Morton Anderson for the win. 38-yard field goal by Morton Anderson. The hold, the kick, it's on the way, it's up, and it's going! The Falcons are going to the Super Bowl! The Falcons are going to the Super Bowl! The Falcons have done it! They have done the unthinkable. They have won inside the Metrodome, and the celebration is underway on the field. Look at the Falcons celebrate. Jeff Van Note, it's on to Miami. The Falcons win 30-27.
Man, and it would have been louder, but it was in the Metrodome. It was a home game for the Vikings. It was just devastating. Chris Carter was inconsolable in the locker room, in tears. This was his shot to get to the Super Bowl, and it might have produced a really good game, but it didn't happen. Falcons got there. The morning of the game, safety for the Falcons, Eugene Robinson, veteran, had played in 2 Super Bowls with the Green Bay Packers before that, was arrested for soliciting a prostitute. I remember being at that game and in my hotel room seeing Chris Mortensen come on SportsCenter, the lead up to the game, and saying, Eugene, he wasn't laughing, but Eugene Robinson arrested the night before the game for soliciting a prostitute. Robinson played in the game. Now, only a couple of days before, he had won the Bart Starr Citizenship Award. And as the second half began, John Elway torched him for a touchdown. The Falcons lost the game 34-19 and would not get back to the Super Bowl until 2016 when they lost in overtime to the Patriots, blowing that 28-3 lead. But, when you think of unbelievable events, that to me is right there. I mean, you would think, and Gary Anderson was a veteran. He kicked a long time for other teams, and now he comes to the Minnesota Vikings, and he's supposed to send them to the Super Bowl. Fate has it that he's going to make it. He hadn't missed a field goal or an extra point the entire freaking season, and he missed that 39-yard field goal, which opened the door for the Falcons to tie the game, send it to overtime, and to win it with Morton Anderson. And who knows how history would have played out. That Vikings team, overcoming what had happened during the Bud Grant years, where they were 0-4 on Super Bowls. First one with Joe Kapp, and the last 3 with Fran Tarkenton. And they never got the chance to get there. Randall Cunningham would have played in the Super Bowl for them, never got the chance. And they have been regarded, they're the only 15-1 team not to win the Super Bowl, as we had the 49ers did it and the Chicago Bears did it. But the Vikings never got the chance because of the unthinkable happening. You might say this is unthinkable if you were watching the game, as you saw Patrick Mahomes' helmet get cracked off what didn't really even look like a big hit on Saturday night, but the temperature probably had something to do with it. The company that manufactures the helmet, it's called 02, they said the helmet did what it was supposed to do. They said, while the outer shell damage is not ideal, the 02 helmet did its job of protecting Patrick Mahomes during a head-to-head impact during an unprecedented cold temperature snap. They said in a statement released, they said the exclusive multi-layer technology employed utilizes a deformable outer shell, impact absorption layer followed by a stiff inner shell. The design approach is similar to the crumple zone of modern cars, effectively absorbing and dispersing impact forces at the point of contact. Extreme conditions like those experienced Saturday are bound to test the limits of even the highest performing products. So they're saying they did the right thing. Mahomes was given a replacement helmet. He's struggled to get into it. Eventually they got it. And he said later, we have to talk about where we store the backup because it was frozen. So when I tried to put it on, I couldn't get it on. Didn't look great. We were able to adjust it on the sideline, kind of get it warmed up a bit and get rolling from there. Good thing they had a backup helmet. Imagine if he had to borrow somebody else's if he had to play. But I guess everybody has a backup helmet as infrequently. I've never seen that, a helmet crack on the field, but I guess it has happened. But you saw a piece broke off of it, and you wonder maybe that's going to be part of the technology. If they continue to do studies, at one point the NFL allowed tearaway jerseys. If you watch some old film of Earl Campbell, you'll see that they would try to grab his jersey and it would just shred. They had this in college for a long time. And eventually the NFL looked at it and said, this really looks sloppy. Guys running around in tattered jerseys and having to go to the sidelines for a change, so they got rid of it. Could you have the breakaway helmet? Could you have the helmet that cracks on impact and protects the head? Hey, if it works, we've seen what the technology has done for race cars. Used to be when a race car hit the wall, many times the driver was killed. Fortunately, that doesn't happen very often anymore, and it's because of the technology. So who knows? You may be watching games and seeing splintering helmets all over the field, and it may have all started on Saturday night with Patrick Mahomes. Who knows? Tony's coming up next. I will have a 3-hour show tomorrow, so enjoy the rest of the day, and I will see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.